Which of King Arthur's knights was never wrong? Certain. Nice. What do you call a knight in shining armor when he enters a village of cannibals? Canned food. Okay, we got 2 slides left to finish our section on feudalism in Europe. So we'll make it quick. So we've learned what a knight is. We've learned how one becomes a knight, the different stages that a person has to go through in order to become a knight. So now we're going to talk about the knight's code, the code he obeys, the code of chivalry. So the code of chivalry is similar to the Bushido code in that just like the Bushido code is tied in with Buddhist religious beliefs that the samurai believe in and follow, likewise, the code of chivalry is tied in with Christian religious beliefs that the knights believe in and follow. Right? So, a knight, in addition to protecting the Lord and his lands, and then the Lord's serfs and all those who work for the Lord, the knight follows a code of chivalry, and this helps to give stability to Europe. Right? It's this honor code that knights are supposed to follow. So chivalry is basically the code of a Christian warrior. Right? And it requires bravery, generosity, and loyalty. Right? So you're supposed to be brave in battle. You're supposed to be generous in that you give alms, you give charity to other people. And then, of course, most importantly, you are supposed to be loyal to your Lord, to the person you have sworn your fealty to. So a chivalrous knight is supposed to protect the weak, and most knights interpreted this to mean protect noble women. Because remember, again, in medieval Europe, women were seen as delicate and not really capable of taking care of themselves, in constant need of protection and direction. So a knight would see his job as protecting noble women. Knights were also supposed to be servants of the church, so they were supposed to have a very serious Catholic faith. And then knights were also supposed to perform great deeds because they were supposed to fall in love with women, right? So you're supposed to fall in love with a woman, and then your love would inspire you to perform great deeds, right? Usually that meant being victorious in battle, right? So the way a knight would swear fealty to his Lord is he would go in front of a bunch of witnesses in front of the Lord, and he'd get down on one knee, and the Lord would go through a ritual, legalistic procedure, and the knight would agree to it. And afterwards, in front of all the witnesses, everyone would know, okay, this knight is now legally tied to serving this Lord. So these ties between the Lord and the knight were based on law. So if the knight disobeys the Lord, just like if any other vassal disobeys the Lord, there's going to be a legal punishment for it. All right. So the last thing we need to talk about in learning about feudalism is the economic dimension of feudalism. So under feudalism, there's an economic system called the manor system or the manorial system. Right? So this is a system in which the Lord owns something called a manor. And another word for the Lord's manor is the Lord's estate. So what is this? This is the Lord's house. It was usually a very nice house or a castle surrounded by like a wall. And then it would also include all of the surrounding land and villages that he owned, or where knights or vassals or serfs or peasants lived. Right? So usually a manor had a castle or a big stone house in the middle, and then there'd be a wall around it, and then there'd be a village. The village would include a church and a bunch of fields where the lord would grow his crops, and the serfs would work the fields. The manor system, under the manor system, each manor had to be self-sufficient. That means that the lord was responsible for making sure that his fields produced enough crops to feed everyone under his authority. So all of his knights, all of his peasants and serfs, his family, everyone who lived under the Lord's control, under his authority, the Lord had to make sure there was enough food for them. So the manors had to be self-sufficient. That means they produced everything that the Lord and the villagers needed. Under the manor system as well, peasants and serfs, or peasants were given strips of land to work on for themselves. Peasants could buy this land from the Lord. Serfs did not own the land they worked on, but they did have the opportunity to, over the course of their life, make enough money to maybe, if they're lucky, buy a small piece of land from the Lord and buy their freedom. So yeah, peasants worked the fields, help with the livestock. Female peasants and serfs were responsible for creating clothing and fabrics and other things that the Lord would need. There were a lot of specialist laborers in the manor system. So these would be people like carpenters and blacksmiths. In the manor system, the Lord was both the judge and the jury. So if there was a crime that was committed or a dispute that needed to be settled, instead of going to a court, usually you would go to the Lord's court. In fact, that's where we get our concept of a legal court. We get it from the manor system, because the Lord's public area in his house was called his court, right? And that's where law and order would be applied. The Lord also collected taxes, so he had to employ tax collectors, and he also had to employ people to look over sort of the day-to-day work on the manor. Now, what's really important in the manor system is that the Lord owned the mill. Now, why does this matter? Well, the mill is a gigantic, basically stone machine that allows grain to be ground up into flour. Right? The fact that the Lord owns the mill means that all the peasants, all the serfs, everyone who has grain is dependent on the Lord's permission in order to use the mill in order to have flour. Right? Otherwise, it's almost impossible to produce enough flour to be able to make bread unless you have access to the mill. So you have to be in the Lord's good graces in order for you to use the mill. So usually the Lord would make you pay like a small price in order to use the mill. Now, oftentimes lords were called away from their manors, either by a higher ranking noble who needed them for something, or a king maybe might call him in, or maybe he would go on a pilgrimage, or maybe he would be away fighting in a battle, right? There's a lot of reasons that a lord would be away from his manor. And when the Lord was away from his manor, his wife would be in charge of running the manor, right? So she had to be educated, and she had to be able to get other people to obey her, right? So that's why I refrained in the last video from saying women had basically no power, even though they were looked down upon in the sense that they thought medieval men saw women as kind of fragile and in need of care all the time. The lady of the manor had a lot of power when the Lord was away. Right? So she was an employer of a very large staff. She would supervise what the house was producing, what the fields were producing. She'd make sure taxes were being collected. Right? So she ran the manor when the Lord was away. So this meant that a lot of noble women had to be educated. They had to be wealthy. Otherwise, they weren't going to be able to run the manor very well. All right, that is it.